I wanted to take a minute today to sit down and talk about using Chinese herbal medicine to help stabilize and regulate menstrual cycles, because I do that all of the time in my practice with my clients, and I think it is a really amazing tool to help kind of stabilize and improve hormonal health. So let me tell you how things work in my practice. Almost all of my fertility patients and or women's health patients, meaning someone who might have any kind of problem with their menstrual cycles, irregular cycles, painful periods, PCOS, stuff like that, I will have them track their basal body temperature or their BBT chart, along with any kind of menstrual symptoms, including how many days of bleeding do you have, do you have cramping, do you have clotting, do you have spotting, how long does your luteal phase last? How long does your follicular phase last? I should have said that in reverse. Do you have clear, stretchy, slippery cervical mucus mid-cycle? Those sorts of things. So we take all of that information and use it to evaluate and then track progress of your menstrual cycle. So let me give you an idea of what we're looking for. We are basically looking for very specific parameters within your menstrual cycle when we're looking at the BBT chart in combination with signs and symptoms of your menstrual cycle. Ideally, what we're shooting for is, now this is a graph that shows a very smooth line. No one's going to have a smooth line in their BBT charts. It's always going to be up and down here and up and down here. But this chart, this picture particularly, is showing you averages. So what we're looking, temps may be high just in the first few days as you're getting your period, if this is cycle day 1. Then temperatures to average during your follicular phase, that's the first half of your cycle, around 97.2. Ideally have a dip right around your estrogen peak, which is when you're going to be ovulating. And then for within 3 days, maybe even less, that temperature spikes and then averages around 98.2. Again, this line is showing a smooth line because it's showing the average, but anybody's BBT chart is going to go up and down at this point. But we want the average of those luteal phase temps to be around 98.2 degrees. At the same time, what we're looking for is 4 days of fresh bleeding, so that's not spotting, but actual full flow, where you're soaking a pad or a tampon every 4 hours throughout those days. No clotting, no cramping during that time. And of course, during that early phase of your menstrual cycle, for your temps to average around 97.2. We want you to have a clear sign of ovulation, which means a dip in your BBT chart, obvious cervical mucus, and no pain at ovulation. And then no pain or PMS of any kind leading up to your menstrual cycle. So no spotting before your cycle. And then again, your average luteal phase will be about 14 days, hopefully. And then your average temperature to be around 98.2 degrees during that second half of your cycle. So this is kind of what we're shooting for. This is our end goal when we're looking at making improvements or healing the menstrual cycle. But oftentimes what we find is that women have very short bleeding cycles, so they're only bleeding for 1 or 2 days, and even during those 1 or 2 days, their bleeding might be very, very light. They're nowhere near changing every 4 hours, or the opposite of that, where they're having very, very heavy bleeding, where they're changing a pad or a tampon every 2 hours or even more frequently. People have cramping, clotting, spotting before periods, spotting after periods. They'll have a lack of cervical mucus, or they may even have copious amounts of cervical mucus. And then I think what's more commonly known for people is that they'll have short luteal phases, or they can have short follicular phases, which is problematic as well. So initially when you come in, we start the investigative process by having you do your BBT charts. And if you don't know how to BBT chart or you want a free chart, you can, I'll provide a link below, and you can download my instruction manual and my free chart and then kind of get you started. But we have people start their BBT charts, and then we gain information about your specific hormonal health by looking at how your chart plays out. Then we take that information and we create an herbal medicine protocol. And I use a very specific herbal line called Conceivable, which was developed very specifically for treating fertility patients. And it's totally amazing, and I love it, and I use it all the time. I use it on myself, and I've used it for patients for a good long while. So Basically, how it works is once we compile all of that information about your specific hormonal profile and your menstrual cycle, then we'll figure out exactly which Chinese medicine prescription is going to work best for you. Always with the goal of trying to get you back to this ideal cycle. And we call it the conceivable cycle because basically there have been studies shown, both research studies, but also just a look at like literally thousands and hundreds of thousands of BBT charts to find which particular menstrual parameters lead to higher conception rates. And what they have found is that these particular parameters, the ideal conceivable chart, leads to higher levels of pregnancy. So when I have folks coming in specifically for help getting pregnant, we don't always necessarily know what the problem is, if there is a problem at all. And so we're looking to just make little tweaks along the way in health. We might work on your digestion. We might work on reducing stress. We might work on improving sleep. But we're always going to work on improving your menstrual cycle and moving you more towards this ideal, what's called the conceivable cycle. And that's those specific parameters that we talked about earlier. So to do that, I put together a very specific herbal protocol that is made individually for each patient for each month within their treatment. And they get either, they get 3 different prescriptions. So one during the bleeding phase. This is the one I use most often. This is about getting rid of cramps and clotting and helping the free flow of blood in just in the bleeding phase of your period. And then you'll get another bottle that is for, now these ones are really specifically made up just for you, for your follicular phase, and then one for your luteal phase. That's the second half of your cycle. And ideally, when you come in for a regular acupuncture treatment, you're making dietary changes, you may even be taking Western supplements, and you're definitely taking the herbs, you're going to see about a 20% improvement in your menstrual cycle each month. So we're continuing to track with your BBT charts, and we're documenting all of your symptoms. So are you having less clots? Are you having less pain? Do you have less PMS? Do you have less symptoms before your cycle starts? Do you have less spotting? Is it more blood flow if you had really light blood flow, or less blood flow if you had too much blood flow? So we're tracking all of that, all with the idea of getting you closer and closer to kind of a healthier, more fertile menstrual cycle. So I guess that's it. I just kind of wanted to tell you why we use BBT charts, that I think they are enormously valuable. And then once we gain all of that information about your specific hormonal patterns, what we do about it. And what we do about it is we use herbs. And I didn't always use herbs in my practice, but when I started using herbs, and these ones specifically that were about treating you during the 3 phases, your bleeding phase, your follicular phase, and your luteal phase, it made a huge and fast impact on menstrual cycles, and certainly pregnancy rates. So I think that they're just enormously valuable. I love using them. Patients really enjoy using them. They're super easy to use. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about it today. So if anybody has questions or is interested in learning more or figuring out how an herbal protocol might help you, please just give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'll leave all my contact information at the bottom of the screen.